Maybe you already heard your parents or somebody discussing the water problems. Maybe where you are it's not a problem. Maybe you hear of other people having water issues. So this is titled We Want Water, and there are many places across the world where there is sometimes too much water. Remember, we talked about extreme rainfall and rain falling very heavily these days, and we talked about how climate change is creating drought, so water may be disappearing in many places, and maybe it is getting dirty because of heavy rain is mixing unclean water with clean water, or maybe it's creating distance between the people who are using this water, and now the water body has dried up and it's become far away, so the supply and the distribution may be problem. So water can be an issue in many ways. Quantity, how much water you need, and quality, how clean it is, and access, whether you need to buy it or whether it's supplied to you in a pipeline or whether you have to carry buckets of water from somewhere and so on, can be all issues that are maybe already there, but now climate change may be making it worse, right? So after Lake Titicaca, Lake Pupo is the biggest lake in Bolivia, and it is the lake with the funniest name, of course. But since 2015, Lake Pupo has no longer been a lake. High temperatures have caused the shallow water to evaporate. Remember, hot air makes it thirsty, so it keeps drinking water from the lakes, and thousands of dead fish lie on the cracked bottom, roasting in the sun and scattered across the dry plain. Fishing boats wait to go sailing again to fish. That moment may never come, though. The water of Lake Pupo came from rain and from glaciers, but not much rain has fallen in recent years, and less is coming from the glaciers because they are getting smaller and smaller with the warming, and they are melting away. However, it's not all the fault of climate change. Farmers and mines in the region secretly took far too much water for themselves from the Lake Pupo. They need water for agriculture and to get lithium out of the ground for the battery in your smartphone. The truth is that there is simply not enough water in Bolivia. Now you think about it, Bolivia has not such a big population, but now it wants to make money from lithium, and mining lithium requires that you push water in and push out the lithium, and lithium is supposed to be good for climate change because you can make batteries, and then you can store energy from the sun and the wind in the battery, can make electric vehicles with these batteries, and everything can run on lithium, except if somebody is losing water because of lithium. So your cell phone, smartphone, where you are sitting, may be causing drought in Bolivia. Imagine turning on the faucet and nothing comes out of it, or flushing the toilet and it doesn't flush, or going to the store for bottles of water but the shelves are empty. In fact, you may have money to buy it, but there is just no water. That was what happened for weeks in large areas of Bolivia. Schools closed their doors because there was no water. They weren't allowed to go to the bathroom in restaurants because they had food and drinks, but they had no water to flush the toilets. The government brought tankers of water, and the people lined up with buckets and basins. They were only given water to drink and not to wash themselves. Just there wasn't enough water for washing yourself. The Bolivians were furious with the government carrying empty buckets and bottles. They went out. I should read it separately. The Bolivians were furious with the government carrying empty buckets and bottles. They went out onto the streets to protest. They held up signs saying, "We want water," as if the government could do anything about the fact that there was no water coming out of the faucets. Well, they kind of could. They should have known for a long time that less and less water would be available, which was a very good reason to use it carefully and make rules to say don't waste water, by making sure that farmers didn't waste it on their land and that miners didn't take it secretly without telling anybody. And as in the Amazon, endlessly chopping down trees wasn't a good idea in Bolivia either. Bolivia isn't the only country struggling with the increasing droughts. Excuse me, there is a doorbell ringing. Funny thing is, the person who rang the bell is the electrician who's working in the building, and guess what? He wanted some water. Okay, so we're talking about Bolivians, and we said Bolivia isn't the only country that is struggling with increasing drought. In the United States, water in California is being regulated and rationed even because there is not enough of it. When rationing happens, it means that people aren't allowed to wash their cars, fill their swimming pools, or spray their golf courses, which are of course luxuries that waste lots of water. So it's more of a luxury issue, but drought and storms also cause big forest fires. They dry up the vegetation, because when the air is dry and thirsty, it even takes water out of vegetation from trees and forests. Okay, and that it's not about luxury. People regularly have to flee, and there are deaths and casualties in many places when there are water issues. Okay, so the countries around the Mediterranean are also becoming warmer and warmer. As we saw before, there are more forest fires and frequent water shortages. During the worst of the droughts, people in Spain are not allowed to spray their yards or add water to their pools, and there you are in your 5-star hotel with all those water slides and swimming pools and jacuzzis and spas. Experts predict that many beaches in Spain, Portugal and Turkey will in the course of this century become too hot for summer vacations. Droughts and heats will slowly change parts of these countries into deserts, and oddly enough, you can already see that happening in the last few decades. So here you can see Lake Pupo with few fish surviving and few already dead and desiccated and few just dying for water. Okay, so this is not a joke anymore. Now let's move to another place which has lots of water problems. So you have here India, Sri Lanka down here, there is Bangladesh here, Nepal here, Pakistan, Bhutan, and so on and so forth. So India has a very unique circulation during the summer, June, July, August and September. It gets a lot of winds from the ocean, like it's happening just now this month, and today we had a lot of rain. Well, not a lot, but we had rain. And when the winter comes, the winds change directions, and I have some podcasts on the monsoon. If you're old enough, you can go and listen. So brings a lot of rain during this season when the winds come from the ocean and bring a lot of moisture. And during this season there are little parts of India that get rain, but most of the country does not get rain. So it gets rain for 3 to 4 months called a monsoon, and then it's dry for 9 months. The wind that brings the rain is called the monsoon. So if you look at January to December here with a nice umbrella as an illustration, and you look at millimeters of rain in Cherrapunji, which is here in the monsoon region in the Himalayan foothills, and when the winds run into a mountain, they have to rise, and if they rise again, they expand and cool, and they can produce lots of rain. So it gets little bit of, oops, let me bring up the laser pointer, gets a little rain in February and March, and then it increases in April and increases in May, and then jumps again in June, jumps again in July, and then it begins to die away by November. So it has a very strong monsoon, and here look at it, 3,000 millimeters of rain. That is 3 meters of rain. Okay, it's a lot of rain, in case you don't know that. In the Indian city of Cherrapunji, there is a sign saying that the hottest place on planet is that city. There are places in the world that think they are even wetter, but it's safe to say that Cherrapunji is a very wet place. On average, 11 meters of rain fall there every year. 11 meters. Take the size of the city and add 11 meters of water and see how many buckets of water that is. Okay, that's a lot of water. That's enough to give the Diplodocus a dunking. Compare it to Chicago, where there is around 90 centimeters of rainfall in a year, and even rainy Vancouver gets only roughly 130 centimeters of rain. That's much less than 11 meters. But it's not always wet in Cherrapunji. In December and January, a couple of centimeters fall at most, while in the summer it pours and pours and pours. Okay, the month of July in 1861 even made it into the Guinness Book of World Records. A total of 9.3 meters of rain fell in a single month. Folks, that's a lot of water in one month. Okay, the big difference in rainfall is because of the monsoon that blows in India and Southeast Asia. The monsoon is a wind that first blows one way for 6 months or so, from the ocean onto land, and then it reverses and goes from land to the ocean. This has to do with the temperature difference between land and sea, and you can sit and think about it, because we have talked about heat capacity of various things. Land warms very fast and cools very fast, so it has low heat capacity, whereas the ocean warms slowly and cools slowly, so it has high heat capacity. Now you can use that to do some homework, saying in the summer when the sun is north, will the land heat faster or slower? And if it warms faster, will the pressure decrease or increase? And if the ocean is cooler or warmer, and what is its pressure, and which way is the pressure, and which way the winds will blow? And then you have to add the rotational effect. Remember, we said the world is a merry-go-round, and the winds get moved in certain direction because of rotation, like you are on a merry-go-round. If you don't hold on, you will fall off, right? That's what happens as well. Okay, so when the wind comes off the land, the air is very dry because it's coming from cold latitudes in the months of November, October, November, December, January, and so on. Air is very dry. When the wind blows from the sea, it brings huge amount of water with it. Global warming is making these differences even larger, because the monsoon requires this land ocean heat contrast, as we say. With global warming, land can warm faster and the ocean can warm slower, and then you have pollution, which does solar dimming, as we said before. Remember, we saw before the warming on India is not so much because it's maybe having too much pollution and not getting as warm as it should get, even though land has low heat capacity. Okay, so the net result is monsoon is becoming more difficult to predict. Sometimes it can be very dry, and suddenly it can get very wet from day to day or from year to year. Sometimes the monsoon is much too early. It should start around June 1 as it did this year, but sometimes it may not arrive till the third week of June, which means the farmer is just waiting there for 9 months in a dry weather, hoping for rain to start growing crops, and then there is no rain. That has serious consequences, of course, for the inhabitants of this region. And you know that India has a lot of people. This region has more than 1 billion people. There are easily 1 billion people, but actually more. Many of these people depend on the monsoon for drinking water, for agriculture, for everything else. Farmers need the rain to grow rice and other crops. If the harvest fails, they don't make any money, and there is a risk of famine. Remember, when famine happens, people don't even have enough to eat. Okay? But if too much rain falls, and then the rivers flood and the crops get damaged, and you've probably seen the pictures, the tops of the palm trees poking out of water, houses collapsing into rivers with a crash, fully loaded scooters driving through the brown water that is probably very dirty. It's all the fault of the monsoon. But the local people can't live without the monsoon. You should see what happens when the monsoon is late. In New Delhi, the temperature goes up to 45 degrees. In fact, this year it may have reached as high as 50 degrees at night. It doesn't cool much. It's at most a few degrees cooler, which means you can hardly sleep. The 20 million inhabitants of this massive city long for cool air. Their fans, their air conditions are are no good to them because the electricity keeps failing as well. There is no rain, no water. You cannot produce electricity unless you burn a lot of coal. So in dozens of cities, people are threatening employees of the electricity companies because they want electricity. They are furious that there is no electricity when they really need it in the middle of the day when it's so hot, or in the middle of the night when they want to just get some sleep. But that's no coincidence. If everyone turns the air conditioning on all the way up, the power stations have to work at full power. Power demand goes up, and water is needed for that too. Cooling water for the coal-fired power plant stations is also a big demand, and lots of water for the hydroelectric power stations, which collect water behind the dam and run the turbines to produce electricity. But if the monsoon doesn't show up, the reservoirs will go empty. As you can see, here is a dam, here is a reservoir, here is a power station, and there is the river. So if rain doesn't come and this drops, then you don't have enough water to produce hydroelectric power. Then almost 2 weeks later than usual, the rain finally arrives. The children dance in the streets. The dust disappears from the air, the temperature drops from hot to warm. A sigh of relief passes through the city, but along with the water come the mosquitoes, and the mosquitoes bring nasty diseases like dengue and malaria and chikungunya and so on and so forth. And the water is everywhere, and waterborne diseases are also a problem. So you can see, if temperatures get warm, more pathogens and bacteria and viruses grow in these waters, and you can get sicker. So it's a massive problem. And talking about getting sick, we'll come back and talk about ticks and mosquitoes and pollen that make us sick all the time. Okay, so we'll see you in the next podcast.